Next, I'm going into actual designing and making my control panels. This right here is an area on my layout that is the control panel, the design for the coal mine. And when I draw these out, I draw them out in full scale. And the reason for that is to make sure that when you're placing switches and LEDs and things of that nature, is to make sure that you have room for them. Well, if you notice on this particular drawing, I started out with the lines here. I don't know, can everybody see that? And then I changed it to a 45-degree angle. Well, when I did it in a 45-degree angle, I realized that these larger circles are where switches are on the control panel. On the back side of the panel, they are much larger than the circle. Having built these before, I knew that I had to put it on this angle, which I think was 30 degrees. That gave me plenty of space between the switches that were going to be on the back side of the panel, as you'll see here shortly. This is just another drawing of another control panel, another drawing of a control panel. If you noticed on all of them, I went through and identified where I was going to have particular items on the control panel. This being the switch, when the switch was thrown to the left, that's going to be a green LED that comes on. This is the normal route. And since the normal route was diverted, there's going to be a red blinking, flashing LED that comes on, and that green light was going to go off. The red flashing LED just indicates that the turnout is not in the normal position, and when you've gone through that turnout to bring it back to the normal position, that green light goes out, this green light comes back on. So when I drew these out, I made sure that I had all the provisions that I needed for every turnout, and then I kept a running list of the items that I would need to do it. This is just a drawing of the yard. The previous drawing, since my yard, you'll see here in a little bit, is rather large, I needed 2 control panels to take care of it. So that was the west yard. This is the east part of the yard. The rest of them are nothing more than more drawings of all of the various control panels. Now on the control panels, for them, I use a black Lexan plexiglass, whichever you want to call it. When I made my control panels in Michigan, I used 1/4-inch stripes. And I remembered I did not like the 1/4-inch because they were just so big and gaudy. So I changed it down and went with a 1/16. To me, it just looked a lot neater. In this control panel here, you can see where all of the switches and the lights, LEDs are placed in. And this picture right here, it just shows you another one here with the switches and everything in. This is the back side of the one of the panels. And if you notice, everything on the back side takes up much more space than the front side. That's the reason for drawing it out in full scale, so that you will note that when you start putting the items onto your actual control panel, you have enough space between each of the items and you don't mess up. When I made my first control panel in Michigan, it was very similar to this one right here. And when I go back to this drawing right, excuse me, this one right here, I didn't draw this out to full scale. I just drew it out on a piece of paper and drew all the lines. And here was a switch and a switch and that, so on. Well, by the time I started, then I go to cutting out the sheet and punching all the holes. When I got to putting everything on the backside, things were too close. So plexiglass ain't cheap. And doing all of that work and then having to start all over is a pain in the butt. So by making it full scale and then recognizing what amount of distance you have to have from one item to the other, then it's comes out right. But there's a finished control panel. The only thing that I did do on these control panels, I remember, you guys remember on one of the Tuesday night Zoom meetings, we were talking about flashing and blinking lights. And after going through all different kinds of setups on my workbench, trying to get to work it where if a locomotive came off the track, a blinking, flashing red LED came on to indicate that you had a derailment in your area that you were working on. I could not get the flashing red light to work correctly. So after that, I went to using two of them. And the reason for the two of them, I was able to develop a circuit that I could get to work properly with two lights. These do nothing more than flash back and forth. Bruce calls them flip-flops. I call them alternating, but it's just two red LEDs using this circuit board right here. The circuit boards that I'm using right here, one of them, this circuit board right here is a full wave rectifier where the power came in from the track, from the power of the booster into what's known as a buck board. And all that does is control the amount of voltage coming out of it. This is a flip-flop or an alternating LED circuit right here that hooks into these two lights right here. These two LEDs right here are hooked into this board. The reason for those being there right now was just so that when I tested this board, I knew that the circuit was completely working. These come out and then wires are hooked in here that connect onto the back of that board. Excuse me. Okay. This here is nothing more than another picture of all of the control panel mounting boards. Painted them all black, same as the rest of the fascia of the layout. And like I said, let me get a drink here. Like I said, for each of the control panels, each control panel has their own circuit board. And the circuit board, as I went through this right here, this one being for the power plant, the power plant has 12 turnouts in it. And the 1 through 12 is for the tortoise controllers that control the turnouts. So the turnouts are connected into the top. I connected them in the top row, and the ones coming from the control panel are connected into the other row. These two strips right here are the power strips that are coming from the power for the tortoises. The reason for two rows is LEDs only care about negative and positive power. The example being, if this switch right here is turned up, if it's turned up, that should indicate that this is the track that it's going to go on, and this LED should be on and green. To accommodate with that switch in this position, when I connect to the wires here onto these, one is positive, one is negative. So I have to make sure that one of them is positive and the other one is negative, so that that LED is on when it's in its up position. All of the power is hooked in. The power coming from the tortoises is hooked into one side for the positive and negative, and then they're just split on these two here. Might be confusing. Maybe some of these next pictures will help to understand that. This one right here is the coal mine. This right here is the wire coming from the control panel. This is the wire coming from the tortoise. And that's with the switch, it controls that the direction that the turnout is in and which LED should be on. You can see now, this is where the power comes into these strips right here that goes through the switches that control the power direction on the tortoises. And this is the hookup of the power coming from the layout track to control the flip-flop switch, the LEDs right here that get connected on to the board. There's everything hooked up, a bunch of wires. That's all it is a bunch of wires. There's really nothing terribly difficult about it. And the reason why I say that is I really, really dislike electronics. To me, this is, I despise electronics, but I've got to do it for what I wanted to do on my layout. To me, that's nothing more than a bunch of wire that doesn't make any sense. But when you take it one piece at a time, it's not that bad. This is with all of them installed and turned on, and with power to the layout so that you can see the panels. And there's the other section of the layout, and that's it. So I'm going to leave it here to questions from anybody on why I did this or why I did that, and or to tell me I am open to any criticism.